Podcast.
They're here.
Welcome to another episode of Blood, Gore, and Ghouls podcast. I'm your host, Ian Van Gogh. I hope you all who celebrate had a wonderful Thanksgiving with delicious food, friends, and family. Now, it's a busy time of year, so for this episode, I'll be rolling solo. I do have some pretty cool things planned for December, though. I have a new guest scheduled for next week, some returning guests lined up, and a special Christmas horror episode planned. Now, speaking of Christmas horror, be sure to follow my TikTok account at ian.vangol for another year of 25 days of Christmas horror movie reviews. So last year, I reviewed a different Christmas horror movie every day from December 1st through the 25th. I have 25 more lined up for this year. Now, I can't promise that I'll have 25 more for next year, but I've got it covered for this one at least. And speaking of new things, I am working on brand new merch for 2024. So if you haven't checked out GhoulSquadShop.com, that's where I have all my merch, all my merch designs and things that you can buy. So there's a lot of Ghoul Squad merch in there right now, as well as a few other things. But for next year, I'm going to have some of the podcast merch up for purchase, more Ghoul Squad designs, and a few other things. So go check it out. If you want to get anything now, make sure you get it by the end of the year, because I'm going to pretty much take most, if not all, of the current designs down and replace them with all new stuff. So yeah, just be on the lookout. Again, GhoulSquadShop.com.
We interrupt this program for a special news bulletin.
So Steel City Con is only 2 weeks away now. Unfortunately, I have some sad news. So the person that I was most stoked to meet, Sam Raimi, had to cancel his appearance. So I will not be meeting him this time, but I'm hoping he can make it to another one very soon. Hopefully sometime next year. That'd be awesome. I'll still be attending the con though. I haven't decided who I want to meet though, since Sam won't be there. I might just roll with it though, see who's available at the time, see what I can see. It all depends on, funds, crowds, who has a shorter line than others. So we'll see. I'm just going to roll and see what happens. But I am excited to meet some online friends in real life, though. One in particular, my homie Blake. We've been playing games and supporting each other on Twitch the past couple years now, and he is supposed to be there. So I'm very excited to get to meet him in person, and as well as anyone else who might be there. So if you're there, hit me up, send me an email at bloodgoreandgoalspodcast@gmail.com, or just look for me in the crowd. I'm the child-sized dude, covered in tattoos, had giant ear holes, and I'll be dodging and ducking through the crowd, so be on the lookout. So there hasn't been much in the way of news this week outside of the big news that happened earlier this week. I'm sure you've heard all about it by now, but just in case you haven't, it does seem that Scream 7, which is slated for release in 2024, has taken a strong nosedive in the past week. So on Tuesday, it was announced that Melissa Barrera, who plays Sam Carpenter in the Scream series, was fired. An article from Vulture.com states the following. Spyglass Media Group fired Scream franchise star Melissa Barrera from her leading role in the upcoming Scream 7. After she posted support for Palestinian liberation and condemned Israel's ongoing violence in Gaza following the October 7th Hamas attack in neighboring Israeli towns. Since October 14th, Barrera has reposted hundreds of quotes, articles, tweets, videos, infographics, and news pieces to her Instagram stories regarding the ongoing devastation in Gaza, including statements in her own words saying, quote, "I love my Jewish friends. I stand with you in these horrible times. I empathize with your fear and pain. No one deserves to be persecuted or attacked. All Jewish people are not the Israeli government. Do not blame or hate on a whole group of people because of what some are doing. I stand with all those caught in the crossfire." So in a statement provided to Variety on November 22nd, Spyglass Media Group called some of her reposts a violation of its, quote, zero tolerance policy against anti-Semitism or the incitement of hate in any form, including false references to genocide, ethnic cleansing, Holocaust distortion, or anything that flagrantly crosses the line into hate speech. So Variety singles out one of her posts in particular, sharing an article in Jewish Currents magazine from October 13th, titled, quote, "A Textbook Case of Genocide" by Roz Siegel, an Israeli professor and historian, Holocaust and genocide expert. In the article, he argues that Israel's retaliatory actions in Gaza meet 3 of the UN Genocide Convention's 5 acts that fall under its definition of genocide. So in a November 22nd tweet, Scream 7 director Christopher Landon wrote, quote, "This is my statement. Everything sucks. Stop yelling. This was not my decision to make." Punctuated with a broken heart emoji. He has since deleted the tweet. But Barrera made a statement on her Instagram stories in response to her firing, writing, quote, "Silence is not an option for me." She explicitly condemned anti-Semitism and Islamophobia as well. She says, "As a Latina, a proud Mexican, I feel the responsibility of having a platform that allows me the privilege of being heard, and therefore I have tried to use it to raise awareness about issues I care about and to lend my voice to those in need." She wrote, "I believe a group of people are not their leadership and that no governing body should be above criticism. I pray day and night for no more deaths, for no more violence, and for peaceful coexistence. I will continue to speak out for those that need it the most and continue to advocate for peace and safety, for human rights and freedom." So an article from Variety.com shows some insight to the studio's reasoning, or at least somewhat of an explanation why they fired her. But it states Spyglass Media Group initially declined comment when Variety broke the news that the company had dropped Melissa Barrera from the cast of Scream 7. Now the production banner behind the hit horror franchise's revival is pushing back on a narrative that has quickly coalesced around the decision that Barrera was fired for showing support for the Palestinian cause. Instead, a spokesperson clarifies that Barrera's posts were interpreted as anti-Semitic. Quote, "Spyglass' stance is unequivocally clear. We have zero tolerance for anti-Semitism or the incitement of hate in any form, including false references to genocide, ethnic cleansing, Holocaust distortion, or anything that flagrantly crosses the line into hate speech," a Spyglass spokesperson tells Variety. So in the wake of the October 7th Hamas terror attacks and Israel's subsequent attacks on Gaza, Barrera has been posting on her Instagram about the conflict, resharing a post that accuses Israel of, quote, "genocide and ethnic cleansing," and one from Jewish Currents magazine about distorting, quote, "the Holocaust to boost the Israeli arms industry." Spyglass quickly cut ties with the Indie Heights actor following the posts. Barrera was slated to star in the next Scream outing after leading the 5th and 6th entries over the past 2 years. So honestly, my knowledge of what's happening between Israel and Palestine is pretty minimal. But from the details I've been reading, in those articles and other articles about what Melissa Barrera was and is posting, personally, I don't think it's anything that she should have been fired for. I'm not really, she clearly states that, she's not talking about the people as a whole. That she feels for everyone that's caught in the crossfire. She just wants an end to the violence, an end to the killing. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Now, is there more to it? Are there more details than what's been posted in the news? Possibly. But if this is it, then it seems really extreme and fucked up for the studio just to fire her. We've seen this countless times with actors and people in the spotlight of posting things on social media, and usually it's a response from other people on social media, people calling for the firing of that person or some sort of repercussions. I didn't see any of this. I didn't know of any of it until it was announced that she was fired. So it just seems very odd and out of the blue. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's more to it, but I think I'm just trying to make sense of it because the whole thing just seems very odd. But yeah, there's been plenty of backlash on social media towards the studio because of this decision. And the news only got worse for them because on Wednesday, it was then announced that Jenna Ortega would not be returning for Scream 7. So an article from Bloody Disgusting reads, one day after Melissa Barrera was let go from the upcoming Scream 7, Deadline is now reporting that Jenna Ortega will also not be returning for the slasher sequel. So Deadline clarifies this has nothing to do with the fallout from Melissa Barrera's firing yesterday by Spyglass Media over that actress's social media repostings on the Hamas-Israel conflict, nor does it have to do with the actress asking for an end to her Scream contract. So the website notes, quote, "We understand that Ortega's exit from the next Scream was discussed before the actor's strike. A script for Scream 7 is not ready yet, and the primetime Emmy nominee has to head to Ireland in April to shoot the second season of Netflix's Wednesday, which will go into the summer. So Melissa Barrera and Jenna Ortega have been, up to this point, the two main leads of the new Scream trilogy, playing sisters Sam and Tara Carpenter. Needless to say, it'll require a huge change of plans to take the story in a different direction. No word yet on whether or not Jasmine Savoy Brown or Mason Gooding, who of course round out the Core 4 group, will be returning for the seventh installment. So yeah, all the news headlines say that Jenna dropped out due to scheduling conflicts with Wednesday. It just seems very odd that it was announced literally the day after Melissa's firing. So in my opinion, it seems to be more of an act of solidarity on Jenna's part. And I can respect that for sure. I mean, the two main leads in the past two movies. And, if I'm Jenna and they fire my co-star, they either have to recast or rework the script. I'd be losing faith in it for sure. So yeah, I don't blame her at all. But yeah, the scheduling conflicts seems like a little bit of a stretch. But the latest statement from the studio comes from another article from Bloody Disgusting. It says it's been a tumultuous week for the Scream franchise, to say the very least, with franchise co-stars Melissa Barrera and Jenna Ortega no longer involved in the upcoming Scream 7. Barrera was fired from the production by Spyglass, while it was announced earlier today that Ortega is no longer attached to reprise her own role from the previous two movies, and Variety brings a bit more clarity to the behind-the-scenes chaos in a brand new report this evening. So Variety details, quote, it seemed to some fans like the planned sequel was collapsing in real time. However, even before Barrera was fired, plans for the next Scream were being retold. So Ortega's exit had required the creative team to make some alterations, according to individuals with knowledge. But there were still hopes that the team there are still hopes that the actress might be convinced to come back for some sort of cameo. That no longer seems to be in the cards. So another source familiar with the franchise disputed this, saying Ortega was never in the mix for the new film. So they're saying that she was never going to be in it, which seems very unlikely. So, quote, James Vanderbilt and Guy Busick, the writers of the previous two Scream installments, will now work on a fresh draft to present filmmakers. Some set pieces and twists may be preserved, but the movie will need to find new protagonists. So Variety's reports also mentions Neve Campbell and Patrick Dempsey as actors the studio may potentially be interested in bringing into Scream 7, but they make it clear that neither actor has been in active negotiations up to this point. Dempsey hasn't been seen in the franchise since Scream 3, while Campbell didn't appear in Scream 6 due to a salary dispute. So yeah, I'd say things aren't looking too good for the Scream franchise at this point. So they can say that Jenna's departure was planned or expected. I'm calling bullshit on that. We haven't heard any news about anything being different other than, Scream 7, they're working on it. If Jenna wasn't going to be in it, I'd imagine there would be some sort of story somewhere saying her role was going to be cut down due to filming Wednesday, or some sort of a heads up. But for it to all just kind of hit the fan all at once like this seems very, very unplanned and very suspicious. And then after all that, to try and get Neve back after fucking her over with the last movie does seem a bit desperate on their part. Now, I've been very vocal that I did not miss Sidney Prescott in Scream 6. I enjoyed it more because she wasn't in it. But that's nothing against Neve at all. I'm just, 6 movies into Scream, I'm ready to move on from the Sidney Prescott story. But the reason that she wasn't in it is definitely fucked up. That they didn't want to pay her essentially what she's worth. So, yeah, it's a fucked up reason. Like, if they were moving the story along, getting away from Sidney Prescott, then absolutely. But the fact that she wasn't in it because they didn't want to pay her, and now they've just lost their two, main stars, in their franchise now. Only after that are they going to consider bringing Nev back. If I was Nev Campbell, I'd be like, fuck off. Like, nah, I'm good, regardless of what they offer her. Because yeah, that's just kind of like a slap in the face. But yeah, at this point, the damage is done. As much as I love the character of Ghostface, I want to see more of it. I'd say it's time to step away from the franchise. Just let Scream 6 be the end. Let's take a break from the Scream franchise, at least until the inevitable reboot. But yeah, if they try to continue with Scream 7 and still try to release it next year, it's going to be a fucking mess. Because they're frantically trying to come up with ideas, how to rework the script, how to get different characters back. So yeah, if they don't have Jenna, they don't have Melissa. So the storyline they were working on right now is done. That's not going any further unless they recast them, which would be, in my opinion, terrible. Because we've these actors do such a good job, regardless of how you think about the characters. The actors were great in these movies. So yeah, to do another sequel now with those same roles but different actors, I don't think it would go over very well. It just wouldn't work the same. It wouldn't feel the same. And then to try to bring back Sydney and get Nev back after the shit they did to her, I just don't see it happening. So if they try to continue with Scream 7, I don't see it working in a positive way for them. I could be wrong. What do I know? But I don't see it. And, there's already backlash. It's all over TikTok. People boycotting Scream 7. So, I mean, overall, would it still be successful? Probably. But as successful as, the other ones? No, definitely not. But we'll see what happens. Any new updates or stories, anything, as always, I'll be here to report it for you. But tonight I thought it'd be cool to take a few minutes and talk about horror movie recasting. It's always a weird experience when an actor is replaced and someone else takes over the character. It happens quite a bit in movies and shows, but very rarely is it a smooth transition or does it go unnoticed. Now, it hasn't happened a whole lot in the horror genre, but it has happened enough. So I found a pretty solid list from dreadcentral.com with 12 horror movie roles that were recast. Now, they have their own summaries and explanations for the roles in movies, so I'll read each of these, give my own thoughts on each one. I do want to throw a warning out there, a spoiler warning. Now, none of these movies were released, anytime recently, but I do want to add the spoiler warning just in case you haven't watched, some or any of these. So a few of these summaries do include spoilers, so beware. Well, let's get into it, see what roles in horror have been recast, and were they for the better or were they for the worse? So number one is Tommy Jarvis. So Tommy Jarvis was, of course, played by a different actor in all 3 installments of the Friday the 13th franchise that he appeared in. So since Part 5 took place many years after the events of Part 4, Corey Feldman naturally had to be replaced by an adult actor for that sequel, which ended up being newcomer John Shepherd. Though Shepherd was offered the role of Tommy Jarvis again in Part 6, he demanded far too much money to return, and he has noted in recent years that he's glad the studio didn't meet his demands. So director Tom McLaughlin was sold on Tom Matthews being the new Tommy Jarvis, both because of his established name within the genre, he had previously starred in Return of the Living Dead, and because he felt the actor could believably play a grown-up version of Feldman's Jarvis. So yeah, for this one, my thoughts on it. Obviously, Corey Feldman is the best of the 3. He's great as child Tommy Jarvis. No one else could compare to him in that role. But as an adult Tommy Jarvis, which I mean at this point, Friday the 13th, they're throwing a new one out every year. So obviously, with only a year or two in between the sequels, Corey Feldman wouldn't be able to play an adult. So he had to be recast, obviously. Tom Matthews, though, from Part 6 is definitely my pick. John Shepherd in Part 5 just didn't do it for me. Now, Part 6, I definitely have issues with as the movie as a whole. But I think Tom Matthews did a good job, and he was more believable as being a grown-up version of Corey Feldman's Tommy Jarvis. So I would Definitely go with part 6 over that one, uh, in my opinion at least. That one just works better for me. So number 2 is Mike from Phantasm. So though director Don Coscarelli planned on having all the actors from Phantasm reprise their roles for the sequel, Universal had other plans. So executives wanted to replace both Michael Baldwin and Reggie Bannister with recognizable actors, but Coscarelli fought tooth and nail to keep them on board. So after a round of auditions, Universal offered him the chance to keep only one of the two actors and replace the other character with a new actor. And Coscarelli was forced to recast the role of Mike, bringing in actor James LaGrosse. So Michael Baldwin did end up returning to the role for both Phantasm 3 and 4 and reprises it once again in upcoming sequel Phantasm Ravager, which of course released a few years ago. So honestly, I've watched the first Phantasm within the past, I don't know, 5 years or so. The sequels, though, I have not. I've seen some of them, but I'm not familiar with them. I need to go back and watch the whole series to do some reviews on them. But this one, I can't say which is better, but I'm going to go with, number one with Michael Baldwin. Just because, he was the first one to do it. And then he's back for the other sequels, which is odd, but that's kind of cool. But yeah, I'm not too familiar with part 2, so I don't have much input. We'll move on here to number 3, which is Angela Baker from Sleepaway Camp. So since the follow-up to Sleepaway Camp was made 5 years later, Felissa Rose had by that point taken a lengthy hiatus from acting and was focusing on her studies at New York University. So as a result, she was unavailable to reprise the role of summer camp slasher Angela Baker. The role was filled in Sleepaway Camp 2 by Bruce Springsteen's younger sister, Pamela, who also returned for the second sequel. Much to the delight of fans of the first film, Felissa Rose made her triumphant return as Angela Baker many years later in the 2008 sequel, Return to Sleepaway Camp. So this is a rare one where I actually enjoy both of them. So Felissa Rose is a horror legend at this point. Um, I've never met her, but I've seen different interviews and other fans' experiences with her at cons and whatnot. And she seems like a very, very lovely person. So I do enjoy her in the first movie. Now I have not seen Return to Sleepaway Camp, so I don't know how she is in that. But I do really like the performance by Pamela Springsteen in parts 2 and 3. Like it kind of wacky and it has that 80s vibe to it. So it's a little bit different from the original, but I think it works really, really well. It doesn't take itself really too seriously at all. And I feel like her taking over the role works for the better. So if I had to choose between the two, I'm not a huge fan of the very first movie. I prefer the sequels. So I would have to go with Pamela Springsteen, but Felissa Rose still did a great job. So, I like both of them, put it that way. So number 4 is Clarice Starling. So, of course, from Silence of the Lambs and Hannibal. So it'd be quite an understatement to say that it was a daunting task for Julianne Moore when she took over the role of Clarice Starling for the decade later sequel to Silence of the Lambs. The Foster won an Academy Award for playing the character in 1991 and had up until 1997 confirmed that she would in fact be a part of the sequel. She eventually turned the project down. Reports suggested that she was asking too much money to return, but her official word was that she was simply too busy filming another movie at the time. So many actresses were considered for Clarice 2.0, including Angelina Jolie and Gillian Anderson, but Julianne Moore, suggested by Anthony Hopkins, was given the role due to her proven versatility as an actress. Foster was quoted after the movie came out as saying that the characterization of Clarice in the film, quote, betrayed the original depiction of the character. So I'm going to have to agree. Now, I love Julianne Moore. I think she's an amazing actress. But the role of Clarice wasn't for her. I wouldn't say it's her fault by any means. Like her acting wasn't the problem, but it just didn't fit. It was such a departure from Jodie Foster in Silence of the Lambs to her and Hannibal. It didn't even feel like the same character. Now, if they had to recast it, they said Angelina Jolie, which I don't think so. Gillian Anderson, I think, would have been a much better choice She does look, or she could look similar to Jodie Foster, especially Gillian Anderson in the X Files. Uh, Pretty similar, appearance wise to Jodie Foster. So I feel like that would have been a better choice. Um, and I mean, Gillian Anderson's a great actress as well. So I feel like she would have done a good job, and it probably wouldn't have felt so off. 'Cause I do like the movie Hannibal, but yeah, that's always been one thing that has bothered me, that it doesn't feel like the same role. Even though it's Clarice, it definitely does not have the same feel. Or it even in my mind, I can't like trick myself into thinking like that's the same person from Silence of the Lambs. It doesn't work for me. So yeah, I got to go Jodie Foster on that one for sure. But like I said, no fault of Julianne Moore, but it just didn't work. So number 5 is Linda from The Evil Dead. So in a decision that confused many fans and resulted in some considering Evil Dead 2 to be a remake of sorts, Sam Raimi recapped the events of the first Evil Dead in the beginning moments of the sequel to bring audiences up to speed with where the story was. What made this so confusing was that a rights issue prevented him from using clips from the film, forcing him to shoot brand new footage for this summarization of events. Now, rather than bringing a whole bunch of actors in for a quick opening scene, Raimi instead chose to excise 3 characters from the first Evil Dead and show only Ash and his girlfriend Linda going out to the infamous cabin in the woods. As if it wasn't confusing enough, Linda became a whole different person for this pseudo remake, with the original actress Betsy Baker being replaced by Denise Bixler. Baker was pregnant at the time, which forced Raimi to recast Linda again. Linda again changed bodies in Army of Darkness, where she was portrayed in flashback scenes by none other than Bridget Fonda. So yeah, I mean, this one's no surprise. I feel like um, once you've seen Evil Dead 2, it might take a couple times to kind of figure it out. But once you realize that the beginning, like it's not a remake, it's just retelling the events very simply, uh, then it's not a huge deal. Because honestly, like the Linda part, like Linda's great in the first Evil Dead movie. For Evil Dead 2, though, she doesn't really play a pivotal role. Like it's cool to see, their their retelling of the first movie, but it's not a like kind of make or break thing. And I mean, Evil Dead's goofy to begin with. It's a fun, silly time. So I feel like it just kind of adds to it. Like if they had the same actress come back for each movie, I mean, would it really matter? I don't think so. I think it works to its benefit to have a different actress, and for it to not completely make sense on first viewing. I feel like that adds to the fun of Evil Dead. That's just me though. What do you guys think? So number 6, Kristen Parker from Nightmare on Elm Street 3 and 4. So the only Dream Warriors left standing after the third part of the Elm Street saga were Kristen, Kincaid, and Joey. And all 3 characters returned in the follow-up Dream Master. In a forced decision that made my childhood very confusing, Kristen was not played by Patricia Arquette, while the other 2 warriors were the very same, Kincaid and Joey, we fell in love with in Dream Warriors. So since Patricia Arquette was pregnant at the time Dream Master was filming, Tuesday Night was brought in to take her place. As a result, it would be many years before I even realized that Kristen from Dream Warriors was the same Kristen as the one from Dream Master. Not easy for a child to grasp. So yeah, honestly, it's been forever since I've watched Dream Master. I'm not even sure if I realized it was supposed to be the same character or not. That's how long it's been since I've watched that. But I mean, Patricia Arquette is definitely the better of the 2. I mean, Dream Warriors is top 3 in the franchise for me. Um, other than the very first movie and Wes Craven's New Nightmare, those are my 3 favorites in that franchise. I think Dream Warriors is an amazing movie, and Patricia Arquette did an amazing job. So definitely going with her over anyone else. Number 7 is Mary Beth Parker from the Hatchet series. So Adam Green's plan for Hatchet 2 was to make it bigger and better on every level than the first one. A plan that quite frankly worked out perfectly when original Mary Beth, Tamara Feldman, wasn't interested in reprising her role. From what little I've heard in regards to this, she and Green had some sort of falling out, which forced him to move on without her. So with Feldman's departure from the sequel, a spot was opened up for Green to make good on his bigger and better promise, which is precisely what he did when he cast beloved genre veteran Danielle Harris in the role. With Harris on board, the character became a true Final Girl icon, and she later reprised the role in Hatchet 3. So here's another one. I've watched all of these somewhat recently, probably last year. Um, and I don't really remember much of the character from the first movie. Like, she doesn't really stand out to me. But I do remember her from the sequels because I love Danielle Harris. Huge fan of Danielle Harris. So I feel uh, the sequels aren't as good as the first one, just in terms of the movie. But I definitely remember the character more with Danielle playing her. Speaking of Danielle, number 8 is Jamie Lloyd from Halloween 4, 5, and 6. So before Danielle Harris was given the opportunity to take over an established role for a sequel, she herself was replaced in the role that made her a household name. So since Halloween 6 was written to take place 6 years after the events of Halloween 5, and since 6 years had actually passed between the filming of the two movies, it seemed to make perfect sense that Danielle Harris would return to play a teenage Jamie Lloyd. Dimension indeed wanted Harris to reprise her role, but due to a series of issues, including salary disputes and Harris's disapproval of the script, particularly in regards to the decision to kill the character off so early in the film, Harris declined involvement, and British actress J.C. Brandy took over the role. Interesting enough, Harris and Brandy are friends in real life. So this is another one. I know it's the same character in part 6. I wish that Danielle would have returned because she, we know her as that character in 4 and 5. So to have a completely different actress in part 6, it didn't seem like that character. And I mean, I get why Danielle wouldn't want to come back because, uh, there's not very much screen time in there. She is, killed at the beginning of the movie. And the script itself is not so great, but I mean, neither was 4 and 5. Let's be honest. But yeah, that one, it takes me out of it. The actress that took over, J.C. Brandy, did fine, but she didn't have much to work with either. But when I think of Jamie Lloyd, it's forever Danielle Harris. That was the first movies that I remember seeing her in, and I forever will associate her with that role. So number 9, Veronica from The Fly and The Fly 2. So with Seth Brundle obviously dead at the end of The Fly, the only logical way to make a sequel was to have Veronica give birth to their mutant love child and go from there. The plan was to bridge the gap between the two films by having Gina Davis reprise the role for the opening birthing sequence. But since Davis wasn't into the idea of revisiting a character that was going to be immediately killed off, Saffron Henderson, who played the rocker chick Jason kills with a guitar in Jason Takes Manhattan, was brought in for the scene. Cleverly, a clear shot is never seen of Veronica's face in her one scene, so it's hard to even tell that it wasn't Davis. In flashback scenes, Henderson's voice was even dubbed over Davis's. So this one I have watched recently, and yeah, there's not a clear shot of her, but there's enough that you can clearly tell it's not Gina Davis. So yeah, it's another one. I mean, it's not really very impactful. Like like Gina Davis said, like she's killed off pretty quickly. But it is just enough that if you're familiar with the first movie and the actors, uh, it's just enough that you can see that it's not her. That it's bothers me just a little bit, but overall, not a big deal. Obviously, Gina Davis superior in the role uh, because the Saffron Henderson didn't really have much to work with. So, number 10, Mother Firefly from House of a Thousand Corpses and The Devil's Rejects. So it was, of course, the late Karen Black who played Mother Firefly in The House of a Thousand Corpses. Though Rob Zombie wanted to bring her back for the Grounded in Reality sequel, the actress lost the role when she couldn't come to a contractual agreement with Zombie. So Black reportedly demanded a much higher salary to return as the matriarch of the Firefly family. Since Zombie couldn't afford to pay her what she needed, he had no choice but to replace her with Leslie Easterbrook. So this one is another one that works well for me. So if I had to choose between the two, I would prefer Leslie Easterbrook. But this is a one of those strange cases because House of a Thousand Corpses and The Devil's Rejects are two completely different styles of movies. Even though same universe, same characters, Devil's Rejects is a sequel to House of Corpses. Uh, they're two completely different types of horror movies. So it's not a huge deal that the character is recast because I think that Karen Black did a fantastic job as Mother Firefly in House of Thousand Corpses because she is more over the top, more loud, and that's what that movie is. So all the characters are more over the top, more loud, more obnoxious. So she fit very well in that movie. And then to uh, have her replaced in Devil's Rejects with Leslie Easterbrook, uh, it just works for me because even though she, it's the same character, and Leslie does play it a little more over the top, a little more obnoxious than her other roles. Uh, it's still, not quite as not over the top, but not quite as extravagant as what Karen Black did, and it suits that movie because The Devil's Rejects is it is over the top, but it's not obnoxious or loud when I think about it. It's more like I said, grounded in reality. It's more of a gritty, brutal movie. So I think the casting worked very well. Uh, like I said, I between the two actresses, personally, I'm going Leslie Easterbrook, but I think each actress worked very well for each of those movies. That's how I feel about it. Number 11, young Michael Myers. So this is, of course, from Rob Zombie's Halloween 1 and 2. So you might have noticed that the young actor who played a 10-year-old Michael Myers in the first half of Rob Zombie's Halloween was played by a totally different child actor for the flashback scenes in Halloween 2. Though the two films were only filmed a couple years apart, Dag Fark had already grown much larger than he was in the first film, so Zombie had to make the decision to bring a new actor in who was closer to the size Fark was when they shot Halloween. Chase Wright Vanek lucked out, becoming the sequel's new Michael Myers. So this is one that has bothered me since this movie was released. So I do enjoy Rob Zombie's Halloween movies. I'm a huge fan of Rob Zombie, but the one thing that has bothered me the most from Halloween 2 was the recasting of young Michael Myers. Now I completely understand. Dag, the original actor from the first Halloween, had grown. He was much taller, much bigger than he was in the first movie. So it wouldn't make sense to bring him back in that role for this sequel. But what I would have done is just don't do those scenes. Don't bring back a young Michael Myers. Don't do the flashback scenes. Have some, just get rid of that because that's my biggest complaint with that movie is the weird flashbacks, young Michael, and his dead mom in the white horse. Like take that shit out of it. It's a much better movie. So I, it's one of those things like it's kind of the universe is telling you don't do that. don't do those scenes. If the original actor is too big now, let's just scrap those scenes. So if we had just had a straight up sequel without the weird fucking dream vision type shit, it would have been so much better because that movie is brutal. It's entertaining, some great performances in it, but the recasting and those scenes just didn't do it for me. So yeah, the original actor was fine in Halloween 1, but yeah, the recasting just didn't work for me. So our last one here, number 12, Ricky Caldwell from Silent Night, Deadly Night, Part 2 and 3. So no performance on this list is more awesomely awful than Eric Friedman's in the oddball sequel, Silent Night, Deadly Night, Part 2, which saw him uttering lines like, "Garbage Day," with the corniest of glee. So Billy's brother returned for the franchise's second sequel, though it was horror icon Bill Moseley, fresh off his star-making role as Chop Top, who was brought in to take over the role. Seeing Moseley with a fishbowl atop his head, revealing an exposed brain, is mostly what makes Part 3 a worthwhile installment in the series. So yeah, this one is it's a very odd one. Uh, these were some movies I watched for last year's 25 days of Christmas horror. Part two is terrible, but I enjoyed it. Like it's so bad it's good. Part three, it was so bad. I love Bill Moseley. He's one of my favorites, but holy shit, even he couldn't save it for me. So yeah, I would in this instance I would go with the actor from part two. Um, but it's that's no uh nothing against Bill Moseley at all because I love him in every other role, but it was just the movie. The movie itself was so bad. So yeah, but yeah, that's what I think. So what do you all think of the recasted roles? Do you agree or disagree with my opinion on them? Do you know of any other horror movie roles that were recast? Let me know. Send me an email to bloodgoreandgoals@gmail.com. That'll do it for this week's episode of Blood, Gore, and Ghouls. Be sure to follow us on all social media. All the links will be found in the show notes. But until next week, I've been your host, Ian Van Gool. Have a ghoulish week and stay safe out there.